He had nothing left when winter settled over the city like a hard judgment. The streets of Cleveland had taught him how quickly a life could be stripped down to bone. Mark Dalton once wore pressed shirts and carried a leather briefcase that smelled faintly of coffee and ink. He used to complain about traffic and deadlines, about meetings that could have been emails, about a life that felt busy but secure. Then the factory downsized, the job vanished, and the months that followed became a slow erosion. Savings drained. Friends stopped calling, not out of cruelty but out of discomfort. Pride kept him from asking for help until pride itself became too heavy to carry. The night he slept in his car for the first time, snow ticking softly against the windshield, he told himself it was temporary. By the time the car was repossessed, temporary had become permanent. Mark learned the rhythms of survival quickly. Which churches served soup on which days? Which shelters were full by dusk? Which alleys were safest when the wind cut too deep to stay visible? He learned to keep his head down and his expectations lower. Hunger sharpened his thoughts, cold narrowed them. He stopped imagining the future because imagination hurt. When people passed him, he watched their shoes more than their faces, noticing the hurry, the avoidance, the practiced invisibility that made it easier to move on. He did not blame them. He knew how easy it was to look away when a reminder of fragility stood in your path. One afternoon, as gray as his thoughts, Mark stood outside a grocery store with a cardboard sign that read simply, "Anything helps." The letters were uneven, his hands stiff from the cold. Most people walked past, eyes fixed forward. A woman paused, then shook her head apologetically. A man tossed a few coins without slowing. Mark nodded thanks out of habit. Then a teenager in a blue jacket stopped. She looked no older than 16, cheeks red from the cold, eyes unsure but determined. She handed Mark a bag with a sandwich and an apple. "My mom says food first," she said, almost shy. Mark managed a smile. It was small, but it was real. The sandwich was turkey and cheese, the bread soft. He ate slowly, letting gratitude spread warmer than the food. That small moment did not change his life. Not yet, but it cracked something open. Later that day, as he sat on a bench nursing the last warmth from his meal, a man approached him. He was older, gray-bearded, wearing a coat that had seen better days but was clean and mended with care. He asked Mark his name, listened without interrupting as Mark spoke haltingly about the factory, the car, the nights. The man introduced himself as Henry and offered Mark a cup of coffee from a thermos. They talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. Baseball teams, the way winter felt longer than it used to, how pride could be a stubborn companion. Before leaving, Henry pressed a card into Mark's hand. It had an address and a time. "Community kitchen," Henry said. "We could use help. Meals on Thursdays. You show up, you eat. And if you want, you help." Mark stared at the card long after Henry walked away. He had volunteered before, back when volunteering was a choice, not a lifeline. The idea of helping others when he felt so hollow seemed absurd. But Thursday came, and hunger pushed him forward. The community kitchen smelled like onions and hope. Volunteers moved with practiced kindness. No one asked him for proof of anything. They handed him an apron, showed him how to chop carrots, thanked him for showing up. He ate a hot meal at a table, not a curb. When he left, his hands smelled like soap and vegetables, and the cold felt less cruel. He returned the next week. And the next. The routine anchored him. Henry taught him how to fix a leaky sink. Another volunteer helped him get a replacement ID. Someone else mentioned a job training program. None of it was dramatic. Kindness rarely is. It came in steady increments, like drops filling a cup. Mark still slept rough some nights. He still fought the quiet panic that came with darkness. But now there were names to greet him, tasks that needed doing, a place where his presence mattered. For the first time in a long while, Mark felt less like a problem and more like a person. Spring arrived reluctantly, and with it, a fragile optimism. Mark's days grew fuller. The community kitchen connected him to a workforce program that offered training in building maintenance. He was older than most of the participants, his knees stiffer, his confidence slower to return. But he showed up early, stayed late, asked questions. The instructors noticed. They treated him like someone with potential, not a cautionary tale. That alone felt revolutionary. When he passed his certification exam, he held the paper like a passport. The job offer came from a small apartment complex on the east side. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. The manager needed someone reliable to handle repairs, keep the grounds tidy, watch out for tenants who needed an extra knock on the door. Mark accepted with a gratitude that nearly undid him. His first paycheck felt heavier than money. It was proof. He rented a room nearby, a place with a window that caught the morning light and a lock he controlled. He bought a used jacket and a pair of boots that kept his feet dry. He slept through the night. Kindness did not stop once his circumstances improved. It changed shape. Mrs. Alvarez, a tenant with arthritic hands, baked him cookies and told him stories about her childhood. Jamal, a kid from the third floor, followed him around asking how things worked. Mark taught him how to change a light fixture, how to listen for the hiss of a leak. He found himself saying things he once needed to hear. Take your time, it's okay to ask, mistakes are how you learn. He started volunteering again on Thursdays, this time on the other side of the counter, handing out plates, washing dishes, offering coffee with a quiet understanding. One evening, he saw the teenager in the blue jacket again. She was taller now, her confidence less tentative. She recognized him immediately. Sandwich guy, she laughed. Mark laughed too. He thanked her properly, told her how that small kindness had mattered more than she could know. She shrugged, embarrassed but pleased. My mom still says food first, she replied. Mark nodded. Food first. Dignity always. The city still held its shadows. Mark knew that a single setback could knock the balance he'd built. He didn't pretend otherwise, but he also knew he wasn't alone anymore. When Henry fell ill, the community rallied, meals organized, rides arranged. When Jamal struggled in school, Mark sat with him after work, patient and present. Kindness had become a current he could step into, not just receive but contribute to. On the anniversary of his first night in the car, Mark stood outside the grocery store where he once held a sign. He didn't need to be there, but he wanted to remember. He watched people hurry past, saw himself in their shoes. Then he noticed a man standing where he once stood, shoulders hunched, sign trembling in his hands. Mark went inside, bought a sandwich and an apple. When he returned, he handed the bag over. Food first, he said with a smile. The man's eyes widened, then softened. It was a small thing. It always is. Mark walked home as the sun dipped low, the city humming around him. He thought about how kindness had not erased his losses or rewritten his past. It had done something quieter and more powerful. It had reminded him of his worth when he had forgotten it himself. It had built a bridge back to a life that felt possible. He had nothing left once. Now he had enough. And he knew, with a certainty that warmed him more than any coat, that enough could grow.